This video is part 3 of the Coil vessel project, and where I left off in the last video was just after I added the very first coil to the base. I did not do anything off camera, so you can see that the seam is still there, it's still on the inside. And following the template, we have this part here. This is a base, so that's what we're trying to achieve sooner than later. And so I didn't use any tools on this yet, but what you want to use is your metal rib in your toolkit. A little dried clay on it, so I'm just going to clean it off. And then using the rounded side, you could use the flat side, but the rounded side I find works best. You're just going to want to do like a sweeping motion. So what we're trying to do is blend that seam on the outside, and you would kind of want to make a motion inward, right? Because our piece, not our piece, my piece, has a little, you know, the foot on it is more going in. If it didn't have this and it was just going to jet out, then it would perhaps start on the inside and press that out initially. But because I have this angle going in, I'm going to go from the outside. And I'm just going to slide my tool, and I'm going to just pick this up to show you quickly. See how it looked like this? Just that tool, couple swipes up the side, made that seam here disappear, and it just smoothed that clay. And that's what we're going to do all the way around. And with the newspaper, it's great. If we were in the studio, there would be plenty of banding wheels for everyone. And I will bring that out in the next video just to show you, but I'm going to refrain from using that, only to give you a really good understanding of how you too can make one at home without. But a nice little trick too is, because you're working on newspaper and it's in enough layers, you can just grip onto the two corners and just turn it that way. But a banding wheel is a really nice little piece of equipment to invest in or use in the studio if you were ever to take another ceramic course, or just even when you go in at the end of the semester to glaze, just, you know, take a look at them and just see what they're all about. We have a lot of small ones at Dutchess Community College. They come in a variety of sizes for larger scale work, but they really are a great banding wheel to work off of. But that's not to say we can't create our own. So I'm just going all the way around and just, again, just using this swiping motion upward, but yet inward, so that it's collaring in instead of flaring out. Clay is really wet, and I have to say this is the trickiest part of the vessel, at least that's my opinion. But it's really worth taking the time not to rush the beginning stages, right? Because if you get a nice line, follows your profile to start, you'll have that much better luck of just being able to follow the template. If you get all, you know, way too wide or way too narrow to start, it's really going to be hard to use this to the purpose that it was created for you for. So I'll put this together closer. Now you can see that all those sides, by me swiping up, have completely sealed that line that was there because of the additional coil. This is what the inside looks like. And before we add the next coil, because we are, you know, it did really jet inward. Hold it up so you can see. It's still pretty, we still want to go more at an angle, but it is hard to do it at this stage because it is so wet. So I'm really going to just address what we did to the inside and then let this set up and add another coil. I know I initially in the previous video said you can add 4 coils and then 4 coils. Usually that is true, but there are certain circumstances where if I were to add another coil now, it would be really hard to kind of go in and then exact jetting out, which we will do here, right? It's going to have that base, that foot, and then it's going to be flared out. So we're better off of getting this edge foot exactly stiff enough, stable enough, meaning it's dry enough to add the other coils to have it flare out. So for the remaining time in this video, I'm just going to address how we do after the very first coil is added. We want to, just like we did with the cube, we have to consider doing a reinforcement coil. And that's not crucial, but it really is a good working method to get used to, because just that extra baby coil in there, you saw previously with your cube how helpful that was to have in there to reinforce that seam and that edge. It's the same purpose here. So I do not have a little baby coil made, but I can do that here on my wear board. And the baby coil is very thin. It certainly can be just like the cube. It doesn't need to be very thick by no means. But notice I just want to point out, I did spritz on my piece of sheetrock here, but it was very light. And I want to take my sponge now, because I did that, and just soak up all the extra moisture. Again, keeping in mind that we do not want this piece of paper that seals the plaster on your piece of sheetrock to get too wet. So you certainly can use, but just keep that in mind. So then you'll see that I've got my baby reinforcement coil. Got some upset dogs in the background. And I'm just filling that in just like I did with the cube, but all the way around in the seam from the first coil into the base. So you can see what that looks like. And then I'll come back, and what I'll do that you can't see from there, I'll just dip my finger in water, just a very little bit. And I'm just going to smooth that out. Remember, just like we did with the cube. And I didn't bring that to your attention too, as you saw me dip my finger in here. This is my slip bucket. And again, I'm just smoothing that out, the inside. All those seams. Spinning it again, just with my corners of my newspaper. Making that as smooth as possible. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you really want to take your time now to make your base. This is in essence like your foundation, just similar to like a foundation in a house. You want to take your time to do that nice and true and solid as possible, so that the structure from here on out will have that much of a stronger support. You can see keeping it nice and clean, nice and smooth. And because I did that, I was pressing in from the inside and it kind of started to flare out, right? So then I'm going to go back to this tool with the rib and do what I did before, the same thing. I'm just going to go and kind of collar it in, because again, that's the form that I've selected. I'm trying to create that and you can use a tool, but I also want to show you how you can just, go around with your fingers and like this pinching, and you can just kind of force that clay to jet inward. And sometimes your fingers, I have to say, with what I'm trying to achieve, by going around just like this, kind of a lot more effective than the tool. Mainly because the clay right now is still pretty wet. So with that, I'm just going to stop there. Show you the inside, it's nice and clean. The outside's starting to go in. It's pretty much all I'm going to do for this day. I'm going to let this dry out a little bit because it's really, as you can see, pretty floppy. I'm going to just sit it back over here and let it sit out for probably a good half an hour or so, just so that it gets some air, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. But I will certainly cover it really, really well with plastic. And if I were to be finished today, just for video purposes, I would grab a piece of plastic, and I would, the newspaper underneath is fine, so you don't really have to get underneath it. Just let the newspaper do its job and sit underneath it for now. You don't have to wrap the plastic underneath the very bottom, but you do want to try to get as much sealed, again, no air. This is crucial from here on out of your coiled vessel, right? You don't want to go through all this work and forget to wrap it up for an evening and have to start over again. This is, again, super important. So that's one good cover with the plastic bag. If I had another piece, believe it or not, I would put one more piece and wrap it all the way around the board too, just for safety measures. I'm a big fan of wrapping my work especially well, just because I don't want to lose all that time and come back and have it be too dried out. I'd rather have it be too wet and have to wait a little bit and give it more time to dry than to have the loss and be too dry that I can't continue to work it successfully. So with that said, that's it for this step, and there'll be more videos on the coil vessel.